Welcome in. It's halftime. It is week 14. We have the Cowboys, we have the Lions. The NFL did something smart, probably for the first time all year long with Thursday games, of having two teams that played last week on Thursday get to play again on Thursday. But the annual tradition of the Cowboys and Lions on Thanksgiving, then following it up with another game here on primetime. We've got the Lions are up 20-9 right now. We brought our resident Cowboys fan friend here. Jeff Blaylock is joining myself and Matt Waldman. And Jeff, I hesitate to ask if you're feeling good when you're down 20-9 at this point, but we do have to acknowledge that the Cowboys have been a really good football team the last couple of weeks. It seemed like the Marshawn Kneeland stories really galvanized and pulled them together, gotten over some of the problems that they were encountering. Obviously, getting Quinnen Williams and Demarion Overshawn becoming healthy is part of that. Adding Logan Wilson all plays into that defense not being horrible. We saw them on Thanksgiving, that big win over the Chiefs. I'm very grateful and appreciative of that. I was pulling hard for the Cowboys to beat the Chiefs there. But how are you feeling here? Do you think a second half comeback? I think that this game, the Lions are on pace for 40 points. It seems like we're going to definitely continue to have a shootout.
Yeah, I would have expected Detroit to come up with 40. The question is, can Dallas get to 42 or 45? And we will see. I think Dallas gets the ball coming out of halftime, so that'll be really crucial. First possession, see if they can go down the field and cut this deficit down. Even if it's just a field goal, at least get it back to within one score. Am I encouraged? Yes. 3 straight wins, 2 in 5 days over the 2 Super Bowl participants from a year ago. The offense is looking like the offense of old. It is a balanced offense. It runs, it passes. It uses the wide receivers as running backs, the running backs as wide receivers. We've got several tight ends who can play and catch the ball. So I'm very encouraged there. The defense, as you noted, Jeff, was atrocious for half the season. They made a number of moves that Jerry Jones orchestrated. Had a lot of us scratching our heads at the time thinking, yeah, are you sure? But as it works sometimes with Jerry Jones, he has a plan and he's executed the plan. And at the moment, at least up until tonight, the plan was paying some dividends. The tackling tonight's been awful, but other than that, it's been exciting to see a Cowboys team that can actually do something like shut Philadelphia down in the second half of the game and keep Patrick Mahomes contained for most of the game so they can get those wins.
Now, how are you feeling about the Cowboys turnaround here, or just football in general in week 14 in December of 2025, coming off of Thanksgiving week?
I think the most fascinating thing to me is going to be really what they decide to do about George Pickens next year. Because, watching him and analyzing his game this season and just looking at like the routes that he ran, there's not a huge difference between the routes that he runs and that what they're asking CeeDee Lamb to do. Lamb has a little bit more versatility that, if you weren't even going to look at like the data, just look at the film, you'd probably say historically CeeDee Lamb's by far the better route runner. But I would say that, what they asked George Pickens to do, he does very well. And they're setting him up in ways to do work on verticals, doing work on slants, delays, things where he can use his size and get matched up one-on-one on an island. And he's doing that great. I think the big question to me is this guy really ready to be a primary receiver somewhere else? Does he have the self-awareness to look at where he is right now on a team with a very good quarterback who still has a number of years left, a legitimate elite wide receiver in CeeDee Lamb opposite him, drawing defenders away from him, and a very good tight end in Jake Ferguson? Does he look at this and go, I could be on the Pittsburgh Steelers again, or on a team worse than the Pittsburgh Steelers again? Maybe I should take the home down deal and stay here and play for a ring, or try to play for a ring and be a part of that. I would say that the way that most players at that age are probably trained in some ways based on, what they've observed, they're probably going for the money, because they're, it's probably beaten into them a lot that this game is rough. Nobody owes you anything. They're able to get rid of you at the drop of a hat. You better get yours while you can get it. the sad part of that is where's he really going to go where that's going to work out for him? I mean, to me, the team that might be a really nice match for him would be the New England Patriots, because Drake May loves to throw deep, and you have enough talent there with, even if you get rid of Stephon Diggs and give him the out that he has in 2025, and you stick with Kayshon Boutte and Kyle Williams as like the youthful prospect, you could still probably forge something there that where Pickens could be very good. But I just don't think you're going to get. I think Pickens is kind of more like a DK Metcalf type of player. You take him out of an environment where there's two really good receivers and you make him be the man, and you suddenly realize that he's very good at what he does, but he's not quite a primary guy yet. I think people get wowed by the contested catches and the hurdling and the things that he does as an athlete, but not necessarily as a technician. He's very good. He's good as a technician. He's just not great at that area. So I'm going to be fascinated does he stick around? Because if he does, the Cowboys could be legitimately something to behold in the next couple of years.
Well, I can think of a very high-end quarterback that could really use a number one wide receiver, and I think you've got the right division, but maybe not the right team that could definitely use a receiver with a vertical ability to open up.
Somebody trolling Jeff just a few minutes ago. I don't know.
Stephon Diggs, they part ways with him. He could go back, and then you got what you wanted.
That's right. That I could see how they use him. They could use him. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, they could actually use Stephon Diggs at this point in time.
And the pink powder too, probably. So
yeah. I would. I don't know. I feel like it's a little bit tongue in cheek, but also it's kind of how these things work. My expectation would be that Pickens is going to be franchised once the season is over to make sure that they maintain his rights. And then knowing how the Cowboys function, they will probably wait until literally every single wide receiver that can potentially signs an extension. And then on August 29th, after he has missed 3 weeks of practice, George Pickens will get a new long-term deal to remain a Dallas Cowboy. Would be kind of where my expectations would be, given everything with the way that this organization has functioned over the last couple of years.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So, thinking of this, I mean, on the other side of the coin here, where how do you feel about the Lions, guys? I mean, you look at them 7-5, certainly not the record they were at. We've got John Morton, who was relieved of his play calling duties for the head coach doing that job with Dan Campbell doing it. And you see that certainly they were getting more production out of Jamison Williams. It's still been sporadic depending on whether Amon-Ra St. Brown's on the field or not. And then you see David Montgomery virtually disappear from the offense. They just decide Jahmyr Gibbs all day, all the time, which understandable on some level, for sure. And I'm sure a lot of fantasy GMs are happy about that. But where do we feel this team is headed? Do we think this team is kind of a one and done playoff team, or do you think that they will figure it out and be able to return to life the way that we saw them coming into the season?
Jeff, I'm not sure they make the playoffs at this point. I mean, the defense is so banged up, and they lost their safety again today. They once again are the San Francisco 49ers of the North. They have everybody hurt at some point or another. Just terrible, terrible injury luck. The offense has not moved as smoothly without Ben Johnson. It is still a very potent offense, capable of putting up a lot of points when it's up against the right kind of a defense. But I think up against some of the other defenses in the league, it has struggled. It will struggle. And the NFC, for what it's worth this year, has a number of teams that are just in their way right now that they're going to have to leapfrog. And I don't know if they can. So if they do get in, I do think they're one and done, but I don't know that they're going to make it that far.
I think my concern with them comes down to lacking the ability to counterpunch and really needing to be in a certain type of game, a certain type of environment. And I think we really saw it against the Eagles a couple of weeks ago on, I think it was Sunday Night Football, I think, when they played the Eagles. But a couple of weeks ago, the weather was bad, and really the interior of that offensive line is the problem. I think that's the problem just with losing, having Frank Ragnow retire and then trying to bring him back, losing the guards in free agency and trying to replace them with young players. I think that that's where you kind of look where David Montgomery's not been very involved, or having vertical elements with Jameson Williams in the offense and being off target there. He might have gotten one now, but I know I saw a stat a week or two ago where Jared Goff over the last 10 weeks had not thrown a ball over like 35 yards downfield or something like that. And so I think when you see a team that really so much to winning in the playoffs comes down to how many different counterpunches can you provide. Like, you're going to see these different matchups, and we know that this is a matchup based league, and your ability to win games in different ways. And that was where Bill Belichick and Tom Brady always excelled, their ability to win games in different ways, different manners, and where the Chiefs have kind of figured some things out the last couple of years of being able to win a different type of game. I don't think the Lions can win any different type of game other than being in a dome in the environment that we're seeing right now. It feels like it has to be that type of situation for them. And they run into teams that, I mean, obviously we know we have Quinn Williams on the other side tonight, but you run into some of these teams that we had Jalen Carter in the interior, a player like that can really blow up this offense for what we've seen so far over the 2025 season.
Well, I mean, one of the things that you brought up, before the show, and is something that for us to talk about this week, is the idea of, staying up to date with the shifts and changes that are going on late in the season, because those are the things that you're going to have to exploit for the fantasy playoffs. So Jeff Bell, let's start with you, and then we'll go to Jeff Blaylock, and then I'll give some myself. But I would love for you guys to share what are some developments or players or situations that you're looking at that you feel like fantasy GMs really need to stay abreast with so that they can adjust.
I think overall, and it's been talked about throughout the fantasy space this week, but the Jets passing attack. And I think that when you had Garrett Wilson injured and you had players like Tyler Johnson out there as trying to be the primary receiver, that's not going to function. That's not going to work, to have not having any talent at all out at wide receiver. And so what they did at the deadline, kind of under the radar, go out and get Adonai Mitchell, go out and get John Mechie. And while those guys might not be long-term starters, they're at least to a level that you want to see what they can bring. And they're a little bit closer to being an NFL starting player than the other options and Arian Smith or somebody like that they had out. And so now bringing them in and then having Tyrod Taylor at quarterback, you've got an offense that can be a little bit more on schedule, that can make a little bit more of a normal passing attack, because we saw that offense be, I think it was -11 team passing yards one week with Justin Fields. I mean, just the bottom, and as bad as it can be. And so seeing that situation and recognizing that a lot of those numbers that you might be looking at historically were because they had Tyler Johnson as their top receiver. And now that they do have two young-ish players that have upside that they could unlock and become a passing offense there. And Breece Hall has been a lot better than what we've probably realized in fantasy. The touchdowns haven't necessarily been there, which is a big problem in fantasy football, but he's trending to have his best season of his career. And I think if you were to say, Breece Hall is trending to have the best statistical season of his career, I don't know that many people would realize that, but as they get an actual passing attack there, that's allowed a little bit more space for him to function and to be able to have some decent games over the last couple of weeks.
How about you, Jeff?
I think for me, and it goes right back to what you said to open this discussion, Matt, about just keeping your eye on trends and not relying on older narratives to carry you through. It's seeing folks like A.J. Brown and Justin Jefferson just very much struggling to put together decent fantasy seasons to the point that you feel convinced that these guys need to be in your lineup. That it's hard to believe that we're sitting here today and thinking about, do I play Justin Jefferson? Do I play A.J. Brown with my season on the line? And thinking that these guys who were probably second, third, fourth round picks in your drafts, or if you're in Dynasty, you've had them for some time, and you're really having to wrestle with these kinds of questions now. is kind of amazing to me that's where we are. That and the second thing that I noticed, just the increased usage of multiple tight end sets that I've been noticing this season statistically. That's taking some of the weight off the receivers generally, and it's allowing the quarterbacks to throw shorter distances. But the other thing is it's making a lot of the sort of middle ground tight ends unplayable because you can't predict which one of them is going to be the one that falls into the end zone today.
No, those
Jeff,
are
can I
great.
ask you a question real quick?
Of course.
Over the last 2 weeks, who is the fantasy wide receiver one over the last 2 weeks? The overall fantasy wide receiver one over the last 2 weeks.
That's AJ Brown, isn't it?
It is AJ Brown. And that feeds into one of the things, like I wrote about it in my Monday article. I think it's interesting. So Dallas Goedert was very, very good the first half of the year. He was tight end 5 through the first 8 weeks. And Dallas Goedert has been very bad since week 7. It's like tight end, I think overall scoring, because he hasn't missed any games, he's at tight end 22. But if you look per game, it's way even worse than that. But I like to look at keep, trade, cut for dynasty valuation just to kind of have a finger on the market. And so what we see with Dallas Goedert, he came into the season, it was like tight end 28 or so in dynasty value. He spiked a lot into up to tight end 14, tight end 15 because of that strong play to start the year. Dalton Schultz, on the other hand, came in. He was like pretty close, like tight end 30-ish, a little bit behind Goddard, but Schultz was not good for the first month of the season. And then since then, he has been a top 10 tight end since over the second back half of the year. But what happened with Goddard's value spikes up here and stays up here in Dynasty, even though it's really trailed off. It hasn't moved too much. Schultz bottomed out at the beginning of the year, and he's only just recovered back to where he is. So even though he's been a top 10 tight end 1, top 10 tight end over the second half of the year, it's still not nearly reflected in his dynasty value the way it is with Dallas Goedert. And I think that that's one of the biggest things. It's really something that's easy to do when we get out of the season or when we're kind of looking back retroactively, but being in those moments and recognizing that when a shift, because I don't think you're wrong on pointing out AJ Brown there, but then also like a shift has happened. He's been the wide receiver 1 over the last 2 weeks. And so we're getting what we wanted to see out there. So I think it's just an interesting way to look at it.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's really the focus for me this week is on Jefferson, because the same discussion I was having about Brown a few weeks ago, and we watched him become the wide receiver 1 over 2 weeks. We've seen Jefferson be irritated at what's going on. We've seen his head coach say he should not have to accept what we're doing at this level. So that to me means the focus is coming now, the same way perhaps it came for AJ Brown, and that if we are debating whether to sit Jefferson or start Jefferson, we may have him sit on our bench when he goes off for 36 points because we kind of got caught in thinking what's been happening is what's going to continue to happen.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm looking at guys who are maybe receivers that we wouldn't think about starting at all, who could emerge down the stretch, and we're seeing signs of that emergence due to any number of factors. The team that is fascinating to me is the New Orleans Saints. Yes, they went off against the Miami Dolphins, but they face Atlanta, they face Carolina, they face Tennessee, they face some teams that can be vulnerable to big plays. And when you see the fact that Tyler Shook hasn't been bad, I've watched him enough to see, he's a rookie. You're going to see ups and downs with him, but he's delivering downfield. He's taking shots. You have Chris Olave, who is one of the excellent receivers in the league, who just hasn't been paired up well with a good quarterback for a while. And then you have Devon Vele. And Devon Vele got his last week. And if you can get a 1-2 punch at wide receiver for the Saints right now, especially with Kamara being hurt and Devin Neal really just being kind of a placeholder who can catch and run, but not really doing much as a runner, you're going to see this team take more shots downfield. There's going to be more garbage time opportunities. You're going to see Shook be aggressive with those guys. And they complement each other well, because Devon Bailey's that good middle of the field receiver, whereas you can allow Olave then to go over the top, and you can work them in tandems in that fashion. Wouldn't be surprised at all if like the Saints passing offense turns out to be like a surprise little boon. Another team that I feel that way about, that might be a shift, and it might be premature to say this, but Carolina, not so much that I'm ready to like, invest in Bryce Young, because it seems like we're seeing every 4 to 5 games or whatever it is. Every once in a while, Bryce Young asserts himself in the fact of saying, I'm still here. I could still be really good. And, but I need the talent around me. And I don't think Carolina has that talent around them. I mean, I know that a lot of people love Tetairoa McMillan as a primary wide receiver. I just don't think he is one. I think he's a very good number 2, and the way that they're playing him schematically for fantasy, it doesn't matter. He's getting targets. So he's a fantasy wide receiver 1 or on the border of that this year. But if there's a chance that the bottom drops out for him, it's because of the fact that defenses by now know that this guy is making his production off of highly schemed plays. Let's put all our focus in one direction so that we can get him the ball wide open somewhere, or in a way where he's being open in zone. But they're not really, whenever they have him facing a man-to-man defender, the top corner in a pivotal situation, he has not gotten open. I have not seen that happen yet. The guy who is the best at that on this team, and he's not a number 1 receiver either, is Jalen Coker. And you saw last week, Jalen Coker had 4 late down conversions, 3 third down conversions, and a 4th down conversion. And one of them was a go route for a touchdown where he beat his guy man to man tight at the line of scrimmage and just blew by him. And I think that they need that. And I think that there's a possibility that opposing defenses say, look, we're going to make you win with Jalen Coker because we know what McMillan can do and what he can't. Let's stop him and see if you guys can be resourceful enough to make it happen. So to me, Coker, I know fantasy GM, there's probably a lot of fantasy listeners who listen to like a variety of shows around the fantasy industry, and they're probably going, I'm sick of hearing a fantasy analyst tout Jalen Coker because they all seem to tout him a lot and nothing's really happened. I was kind of lukewarm on Coker, to be honest, like long term as a player. But what you see with him and what he can offer this team, I mean, he can catch. That's something Xavier Legette sometimes does, but doesn't always do it. But if you took like him and Xavier Legette and Frankenstein them, you probably have like one of the best receivers in football right now. But I think for this team, they can leverage him. And I think schedule-wise and the way that maybe teams adjust, he's a guy I just want to monitor, just to, maybe make a preemptive call and add him. And then if he has a second good week in a row and we see it's the same things, 3rd down, 4th down, beating guys, man to man on deep routes, I'd be all over that down the stretch.
I really loved Coker's film coming out of school because it was like, I think he had like 8 Hail Mary catches, like his senior. It was like I think it was Harvard, or was it Harvard that he was? It was Holy Cross. He was at Holy Cross. And it was like they 8 different times. It was like end of game situations, and they would just chuck it up, and Jalen Coker would just catch it, and it was wild. But I like that call out, and it's the ability to win deep, the ability to win vertically, and he's really surprised me because that's what you saw on his film, the film that you were able to see from Holy Cross, because sometimes it wasn't always easy to get a lot of film from Holy Cross, but then you see now at the NFL level, you see him really develop as that more of the short to intermediate type of player that can create a little bit too. And like you mentioned, not to the level that hypothetically a Xavier Legette could work with the ball. But I think that there's a lot there to unpack.
So Jeff, one I want to ask you about is oftentimes, when we think about players emerging and things shifting, it's usually where people have written everything off. That's usually the case. That's why I'm looking at the Saints and looking at Carolina.
Yep. I like the Bailey call out
But
a lot.
so the other one that I'm kind of fascinated with is a former Saint who's found his way to Buffalo. What are your thoughts as a Buffalo Bills fan about Brandon Cooks being there? Because they brought in Gabriel Davis, and maybe they start to hook up again, but it seems like it's just hit or miss. We know who Davis is. He's kind of a hit or miss. He needs two guys around him who can create big. He's Tet McMillan basically with not as much ability, from that standpoint. But Cooks, we know he's older, but we know he can still run. And we know that they really need something for this offense as a boost and as a pass offense. Because when I watch the two of the better quarterbacks in football right now, and it just dawned on me, Jeff, is like you watch Josh Allen, you watch Patrick Mahomes, and it's basically the offenses are like, just figure out a way to get somebody the ball. I mean, that's how it really feels. It's like they trot out the stuff that they're going to do game plan wise. And well, that's not working again for another week. Let's go ahead and let's play a little park ball here and figure out how we can buy some time and throw people open. And I think that, Cooks is one of those guys who's been in so many bad situations in recent years that were and has been able to be like kind of a life raft at times for some players. I just wonder if he's got enough left. Do you think there's enough left to say, yeah, maybe he could be that sneaky guy?
I think there is. He had a great 2023 season. He was really good off 2023. And then last year, he just really struggled with injuries, wasn't able to put it together. And then obviously ended up with the Saints. And the Saints, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. I think that was a great call out by you. And it really points to probably Kellen Moore, or probably above all else, I think, because Spencer Rattler looks competent. And we've seen a lot of teams that really struggle
Philly
at quarterback.
misses Kellen Moore right now, don't they?
Philly misses Kellen Moore quite a bit. But
yeah,
I think that unpacking Cooks in Buffalo there, just off that 23, the way that he came through, and he is, out of everybody on that roster, the player that can potentially win downfield, that can potentially, if you need to get 12 yards on this play and it's a gotta have it down. Like, I don't feel good about Gabriel Davis opening up in that situation. I mean, Josh Palmer hasn't shown really anything since he's arrived there to believe he could do it. I mean, Shakur does it in flashes. If you were to get Kincaid healthy, which we're realistically probably not going to get the rest of this season. So yeah, Cooks can potentially be that guy, but I mean, he's definitely at that stage of his career though, of, can he do it? It's like, you can do it 1 week. Can you do it another week on top of that week? And can you do it 3 weeks in a row? And can you do it through the playoffs? And I don't think Buffalo, the way they're stacking up, they probably might not have to play too many cold weather games because they might be on the road the entire playoffs at this point in time. But I think that as you look at the wide receivers, if you were to find somebody that can come through there, I mean, Cooks has a great chance to do it.
I've got another one for you guys that'll be fun to weigh here. We know that Omarion Hampton is likely to come back. Beginning of the year, certainly put up good fantasy production. At the same time, it came when Najee Harris got hurt. It was good, but it wasn't great. And you could see how Najee was like the shiftier guy, probably better when the offensive line wasn't playing unbelievably great, or certain types of runs like zone runs where you can set up defenders more and you have more leeway to do that. Whereas Hampton's really that sledgehammer that comes downhill and you run gap plays and you have that puller and it's just like, we're going this way no matter what, and that's where Hampton was really good. We got the struggling offensive line. We've got when Trevor Penning is your left tackle, it's tough times. I mean, and so what happens here? Are we is this one of those false positives where people look at Omarion Hampton and go, oh, I've got Hampton, I'm putting him in with gusto and we're going to roll here in the late season? Or is this a trapdoor situation? I mean, it may not have to be either one. It could be a little bit of both depending on matchups, but where are you leaning when you see this? Do you feel like folks should be cautious, or are you thinking, nah, even with the struggling offensive line, this is the play?
Well, I'm naturally cautious by nature, and we didn't mention Kamani Vidal in any of this discussion so far, and he has not gone away. And I can see a hot hand kind of approach going on where if one of them is doing very well early, they're going to get the bulk of the work the rest of the way through. You say the offensive line is struggling, so maybe neither of them can get hot. They may not have the opportunity to get hot, especially if we don't have Justin Herbert in the lineup this weekend and it's Trey Lance instead. That whole offense may really struggle to move the ball. But I do think Hampton coming back is good for fantasy. I would probably play him, but I've got my expectations quite a bit lower than what we were having. I'd probably have them back to where I had them when Harris was still healthy and Hampton was starting to ramp up a little bit. And then, of course, you've got Vidal, who has carried some fantasy managers, including me, for the last couple of weeks, as I've had banged up running backs here and there. I don't know that I want to rely on either one of them at the moment. I'm not sure which way that will break, but I'm to a point in a lot of lineups where if I have them, I've got to play them.
Okay, so let's play a little game with that. So let's look at let's say who you would take over some of these players. Would you play Omarion Hampton over Quinshon Judkins?
No, I would not.
Okay. How about Kenneth Gainwell?
Yes.
Okay. Then would you? That's kind of that you're kind of looking at a low end running back too, just kind of from that standpoint. If Chase Brown.
I've always been a fan of Chase Brown. He struggled, but that offense is getting a little better with Burrow back, so I would go with Brown.
Okay. How about R.J. Harvey?
Yeah. Boy, you can ask me to trust a Sean Payton running back, huh?
Then we got the answer.
Well, dude, yeah. See, do I take the unknown hot hand committee approach in Los Angeles or go with Sean Payton? I will. Let me play Hampton.
Then I think we found what we're looking at, which is a low end running back too, essentially for the rest of the season. So okay, that makes sense.
Yeah,
I think it's irony. I don't know, but I think it's going to be like Najee Harris. Like is my expectation with Marion Hampton because of the offensive line struggles, where we did see him have some involvement in the passing game, but the efficiency probably will be bad, and the people that look at efficiency only for a rookie will probably say that Marion Hampton was very bad this year. But I think when you look at the environment holistically and the flashes, and he's young enough that I am very bullish on the future, because I think Joe Alden and Rashawn Slater will be back next year, and they're the two best tackles in football, and Justin Herbert's going to be pretty good. I think moving forward, my expectation of how do I view Marion Hampton is I expect to be acquiring him a lot in my dynasty leagues this offseason, is where I kind of come down on that. I do think that Vidal opens up the, kind of Najee Harris moves on basically, and Vidal can be that guy potentially that Najee Harris was going to slot in, because I do think Greg Roman wants to have multiple backs that he can go to. But I would think that at fully healthy, full capacity, you're probably looking at Hampton getting an 80 to 85% share. Ideally, if he flashes in the ways that he should as a first round pick. Vidal, it's like every other week. It literally is every other week with him. It's he has a great game and then has a terrible game, back and forth. We've gone 8 weeks now or so of that. I think it is interesting just looking at Hampton and then looking at Trey Benson, these guys and Bucky Irving was another one where it feels like they came back a lot later than what we all kind of, or the doctors around the fantasy space or the expectations for around some of those things we're projecting. And so I don't know if there's something to unpack there with these guys or not, or what kind of happened there, but it definitely felt like all three of them way overshot the expectations for return time.
Yeah. Let's continue with running backs. I got one for you guys that I'd love to if you guys don't mind, and that's Ashton Genty. Okay. He's averaging 3.5 yards per carry. He's got 4 touchdowns, but he's running back 12. Which I would say is better than I expected. As much as I was bullish on Genty as a dynasty option, I was, this Raiders offensive line has been a mess. Literally you can pick almost any play and there's at least 2 or 3 mistakes, either in terms of footwork, in terms of how they use their hands, whether they made the right assignment or not. And then we come to find out that Chip Kelly, who was obsessed with Ashton Genty's stance early on, was making calls that were like the tags were wrong, that there were different details with the calls that were bad and caused confusion with the offensive line to further, make matters worse. So I guess the question I want to pose with you is that instead of weighing in on, do you think Ashton Genty is good and people are like writing him off too soon? What might be more fun exercises? What are the factors that you will be looking at in the off season that would lead you either to the extreme of saying, I am buying this guy up in every opportunity I can get, to I'm selling? Like I have shares of him and I'm going to try and sell and get out from under it, even though I may lose a little bit here because I think the bottom's about to fall out. Like, give me your thoughts on on both extremes, actually. Like your thoughts on when you're buying and when you're selling.
I think for me, it may be the same trigger point. It's, do the Raiders spend their first round pick on an offensive lineman or not? If they bring in a receiver, quarterback, something that's not going to help on the trenches, then I will sell. If they do that with an offensive lineman, I'm probably buying. I don't think it's still the case because Genty's had some, you say he's the RB12, he's had some good runs lately, but there was a point this season that he had more yards after contact than he had yards. And that's staggering to me. And that to me is a testament to, one, the offensive line struggles, but also, as was said, Kelly's play calls were shaky at best and inaccurate at worst, and occasionally criminal with the offensive that they had, and getting their quarterback banged up, getting their running back hit 6 yards behind the line of scrimmage consistently. So that to me is it. Is will they invest in the line, or will they go after vanity projects and try to prop up other aspects to try to be more exciting as a team when it's really in those trenches they've got to build? And that to me is going to determine Genty's next 3 years.
So when I'm first on Genty, I think the biggest thing that it's running into is the perception of the player that he was going to be doesn't match the reality of the player that he is, because I think there's a lot of people build up expectations for rookies, and seeing him go that early. And I think like the thought is that he's going to be like a Saquon Barkley type of a back, or like a back that you're putting 25 rushes on and like you're building your entire rush attack. And to me, he's a lot more like Devin Achane, of like the kind of like with the involvement that we're seeing in the passing game, and just for fantasy purposes. And the reason why he's running back 12 is because he is getting it in different areas. It's not the back that's rushing the ball 25 times and is the focal point of the offense in that regard. It's the guy that is catching 6 balls here, 8 balls there, and showing that. And so I think that a lot of times, and it plays into what I'm looking for if I'm going to buy, or if I'm looking for if I'm going to sell, is just playing the market. And I think just reading. We run into situations where we basically invent reasons to fade players, and a lot of it has to do with I think expectations is a ton of it. I think that Caleb Williams is a great example in fantasy, where the expectation that Caleb Williams would walk into the NFL and be the fantasy quarterback 2 immediately, God's gift to our fantasy football minds, was basically there, and he didn't do that, and he was still a quarterback 1. And so, but like people acted like he was the quarterback 30, and so I think that I look at situations like that of like, is what I'm seeing different than the reality of what I think other people are saying that they're seeing? And if I can see a disconnect there, either a player that I'm not buying to the level of the excitement around of, like, I think RJ Harvey is an interesting case there. You mentioned him earlier, and I think everybody's all gung-ho about like RJ Harvey and go, and it's like you did have 2 touchdowns last week, which saves his week, but the efficiency's been horrendous, and I have severe questions about him being the actual running back moving forward there. I think they definitely like J.K. Dobbins, and there's a reason I think we're seeing now with Harvey getting more volume, there's a reason why Dobbins wasn't going to give that job up outside of injury. And so looking for situations like that I don't know, especially like a day 3 type of a running back, Woody Marks to me feels like a little bit of a red flag, because I think there's talent there. I think his usage is strange because he's a talented passing back, and he's not getting any targets at all. It's all rushing volume, but
like
kind of
Damian Pierce part 2.
Yeah.
Well, it's Kyron Williams. I mean, Nick Caley coming from the Rams, it's like Kyron Williams. I feel like a lot of that, where Kyron Williams is like, this guy is very talented in the pass game, but he's not getting any targets at all. And Nick Caley comes, he was the passing game coordinator for the Rams, goes to the Texans, and basically once Woody Marks took over as the main back there, it's like just like exactly how Kyron Williams was. We're just not getting the touchdowns that we get with Kyron Williams to really make Woody Marks feel worth it in fantasy. Getting a ton of volume in the rush game, but there's no pass volume there. But looking at when I'm looking to buy or to sell something like that Caleb Williams example, or like Ashton Genty, I think he's a good back. And I think that he's what is happening. If anybody's saying that he's not, it's because the expectation of what type of back he was going to be didn't match the reality of the way that he's going to get his fantasy points. He's going to be a guy that, again, is more like the Devin Achane model instead of more like the traditional Bijan Robinson model. Well, Bijan Robinson gets it through the air now too, but it just kind of Barkley probably might be a good example with Philadelphia.
Yeah, I mean, look, for me, looking at Genty, he's averaging 18.6 touches per game, which is still pretty good considering that they're behind. They're having to throw a lot. They probably, if they get ahead and ran more, they'd probably run him more, because the thing that we haven't seen with his game that I thought was special, that we're just not going to see an opportunity with, is his run stamina, his play stamina, the ability to play at the same speed at the beginning of a run as you do at the end of a long run. And to be able to do it in your 18th, 19th, 20th touch in a game. But when you're getting the crap kicked out of you pretty much behind the line of scrimmage on a regular basis, and there's lots of mistakes going on, and then you're out of your game script, that element of his game is just not here. So, like Jeff said, I think, like Blaylock said, one of the things that's important is that, we're going to see what they do with the offensive line. Are they going to do what the Bears did, add in free agency and get somebody on the first or early second day? And the earlier, the better. Now, we know with Pete Carroll, he was on a Seahawks franchise where, his John Schneider, thought that he could get offensive linemen at Big Lots, and, and that we can wait until the 3rd or 4th round, or we can wait till the late second day to get ourselves an offensive lineman. We're going to find a gem out of there. And it never happened. I would have to think Pete Carroll, who so much prizes the run, and that's his thing, that probably drove him nuts. So I'm hoping that Pete Carroll's like, oh yeah, we're there. It's no question. I am revamping this offensive line, and we can live with what we've got skill player wise. We need to get the trenches rolling. We got Ashton Genty for a reason. If all of a sudden I hear him talking like John Schneider, like he's like been in the cult of Schneider for too long, and he starts talking about there's opportunities to find guys later in the draft, and there's no action in free agency. I mean, I would probably come off some of my shares of Genty a little bit, just to depending on where my team is. If my team is like one player away, and I feel like that I've got a strong team, and I feel like that maybe I don't want to wait another year for Genty to really pop off, maybe I would do that. But otherwise, yeah, there's no, in reality, there's very little chance I'm parting ways with Genty. I'd probably just be buying into it.
I'm curious your thoughts on the lack of a true outside threat with the Raiders offense and how much that plays into the struggles with the offensive line, because Brock Bowers, excellent, great tight end. He's really kind of the slot receiver. But if that's your main offensive focal point in the passing game, then you're compacting the game down. And if Brock Bowers and Ashton Genty are your main two passing options, then all of a sudden you're playing every single play in a phone booth, which is going to magnify the struggles with the offensive line. And if Geno Smith's not able to attack vertically, whether because of where Geno Smith is in his career or because just the complete lack of, outside of Trey Tucker occasionally, the complete lack of anything that's going to strike the slightest fear in the defense, how much that plays into the struggles.
I think it probably is. It is a factor. I don't think it is the factor, but it is a compounding factor with everything else. And they took a swing and a miss with Dante Thornton because I think that was what they hoped they would get out of him. I mean, I don't know. That was not a pick I was very enthusiastic about.
Every play at Tennessee was either he would catch a screen and break a tackle on some poor defensive back from Southern Miss and rip it just 90 yards, or like just run a straight line and be forgotten about. And like, other than that, there just wasn't anything.
If there's a wide receiver out of Tennessee that I would want to see them take and go, they should have waited this year for Chris Brazzell. I think that's how you pronounce it. Brazzell the second. That kid could actually run some routes. Even though we know Tennessee's system is a thing that we're concerned about at times, but he actually shows signs of life as a route runner and legitimate, like he uses his speed well. I don't know if Thornton really uses his speed well. And Brazzell actually is a pretty fun player and could fit what the Raiders are trying to do there. But yeah, I would be shocked if they're not taking multiple shots on deep threats, later on in the draft, or they pick somebody else up in the offseason. It's going to be fascinating what happens. I mean, the two most compelling free agents to me at wide receiver this year are probably Pickens, who will probably be franchised, and then also Alec Pierce, who will likely probably be sticking around. And so after that, you're looking at the Romeo Doubs and Calvin Ridley, two guys who can run good routes. Doubs more than Ridley, if you ask me. Like, Ridley can be really good at times, but also his focus isn't always where it needs to be. And both of them are a little bit of a box of chocolates at the catch point at times, so that's when they're on, they're on. When they're not, it's ugly. And so they might be the best, because after that, I mean, do we really expect Mike Evans to go somewhere else? I don't know. I don't see that. I don't think, DeAndre Hopkins, as much as I love him, I think that no team's going to see him as somebody we're going to lean on. Christian Kirk, there's, most of these guys are older so I don't think, teams that are rebuilding are going to be looking at those guys necessarily, unless they're just hedges for what they don't get in the draft. This is a strong draft class with a lot of high flying, go up and win it receivers in this class. And, guys like Carnell Tate, Jordan Tyson, even a guy like Mekhi Lemon, who may not be fast, but, get the ball within arm's length of him, and he's coming down with that baby. Kevin Concepcion, Casey Concepcion, Chris Bell, or even Denzel Boston. There's a lot of guys that can go up and get it, and some of them actually do have some deep caliber games. So then, beyond that in free agency, you've got Juwan Jennings, you got guys like that. So it's not, it's not a fertile environment for acquiring a wide receiver this year from a free agency standpoint.
Alec Pierce to me is really kind of fascinating. We mentioned him. We were talking earlier about shifts that we sometimes aren't necessarily attuned to. I mean, Pierce has had this reputation for several seasons of being either the guy who catches a 56-yard pass or he gives you nothing. And suddenly he has now emerged as an intermediate kind of threat, and he's catching these 10 to 19-yard balls and is turning into a legitimate flex to starting wide receiver kind of level of play that if you hadn't been really watching, you would still have him sitting on your bench as the guy who I put out there when I need a home run touchdown. And if he gets me a 0, great. And so that's that to me, it's an interesting character, and I would love to see Indianapolis continue to hang on to him and keep using him. I think he's a really good fit for that offensive scheme and for that team. But, there are, as you say, the market for free agent wide receivers is thin. And so there may be a lot of interest in someone like an Alec Pierce around the league now that he's emerging as a more well-rounded receiver at different depths. I'm sorry, Jeff, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, you're good. I was going to say there's one wide receiver in the draft that just absolutely screams Raiders. Everything about him screams Raiders. Nick Harbor, South Carolina.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah,
I do. But so did Dante Thornton screams Raiders too. So,
well, they went back to the well of Dante Thornton after they've already, but I think that the trade market is going to be where to watch with wide receivers, because is Brian Thomas Jr. going to shake free in Jacksonville? Are the Cardinals going to decide with what they saw for Michael Wilson that maybe they could see what's out there for Marvin Harrison Jr.? Is Michael Pittman Jr. going to hit the market because the Colts decide to keep Alec Pierce around? That's what we saw last year, where we saw DK Metcalf traded, where we saw George Pickens traded. The reality of it is like very, very few top end receivers actually make it to free agency because it is such a premium position in the league, and they end up either being traded to a new environment because the original team has seen enough of it, or they get extended. And, for years we were like, well, wait till T Higgins is the number one receiver somewhere. There's no way he could stay in Cincinnati. Wait till he's the number one receiver somewhere. And then the Bengals sign him because that's how teams build their teams now. And so I think that, we're really, to find somebody in free agency, more often than not, you're going to sign the Josh Palmer that you're going to talk yourself into after the other team talked themselves into them, but actually said, we've seen enough now, we're going to let him go. That's what you end up, I think, in free agency, the guys that actually shake there. But like a guy like Jaden Reed, I think could be available in the trade market. And Brian Thomas Jr., like I said, I think that's what we're going to see. Some of these teams that are really needy at wide receiver, and some of these teams that maybe they decide because of salary reasons or because of other reasons, they're going to move off of some guys.
I would love to see Thomas with the Raiders. I would love to see Wilson, though. They're not going to, they won't get rid of him. Well, they could, because his deal will be up in 2 years, so they could trade him and then renegotiate, but
I think Garrett Wilson signed an extension.
No, I was talking about Michael.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, as you mentioned. But I'd love to see if they could part ways with him. I'd love to see him go to the Bills. I think he would thrive in Buffalo because he could give you the little bit of everything that they're trying to get with all these different pieces. They could get that out of him. That would absolutely be a fun one for me. And then, those are the two that come to mind.
I think Ayuk's probably going to move into a new situation. And my expectation is, obviously we saw Deebo Samuel traded last year. I think we're going to see some major trades for wide receivers this offseason, just like we did last year.
Well, listen, we got the fourth quarter of this game coming up, and it's getting tighter here. The Cowboys have made their way within 8. We should probably give Mr. Blaylock an opportunity to enjoy the back half of this game. But we definitely appreciate everybody tuning in as they always do. We love doing this with you guys, and we love having a guest like Jeff, who's just did a fantastic job tonight. And you definitely check out his work at Football Guys. Of course, check out Jeff Bell's work at Football Guys, both incredible analysts. And, listen, I don't have any other parting thoughts. How about you, Jeff? Do you?
No, I think Jeff, why don't you plug yourself if where to find people and what you're doing and all those good types of things.
Well, you can find me at Football Guys, which should be clear from the branding that I have on today. I'm nothing if not a company man. So you can find me there. I do Dynasty rankings, and I do Dynasty and regular season content, and hopefully off season as well. I'm sure that will be determined as we get into the off season. You can also find me at my podcast, Dynasty Compass. We are a weekly show talking about mostly dynasty theory. So more of how to use strategy and be a good thinker as a dynasty manager, then play this guy over that guy kinds of content. And you can find that on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or at our website, dynastycompass.com.
Good deal. Take care.
Thanks so much, gentlemen. This has been a lot of fun. I appreciate the invitation.